in which the last dangling threads of our story play out in the aftermath of Anna's death. Chapter 8. From that moment when, at the sight of his beloved brother dying, Levine had looked at the questions of life and death for the first time through those new convictions, as he called them, which imperceptibly, during the period from 20 to 34 years of age, had come to replace the childhood and adolescent beliefs he had been horrified, not so much at death, as at life without the slightest knowledge of whence it came, wherefore, why, and what it was. The organism, its decay, the indestructibility of matter, the law of the conservation of energy, development, were the words that had replaced his former faith. These words, and the concepts connected with them, were very well suited to intellectual purposes, but they gave nothing for life, and Levine suddenly felt himself in the position of a person who has traded his warm fur coat for muslin clothing, and, caught in the cold for the first time, is convinced beyond question, not by reasoning, but with his whole being, that he is as good as naked and must inevitably die a painful death. From that moment on, though not accounting for it to himself and continuing to live as before, Levine never ceased to feel that fear at his ignorance. Moreover, he felt vaguely that what he called his convictions were not only ignorance, but were a way of thinking that made the knowledge he needed impossible. At first his marriage, the new joys and responsibilities he came to know, completely stifled these thoughts, but lately, after his wife gave birth, while he was living idly in Moscow, Levine began to be faced more and more often, more and more urgently, by this question that demanded an answer. The question for him consisted in the following: if I do not accept the answers that Christianity gives to the questions of my life, then which answers do I accept? And nowhere in the whole arsenal of his convictions was he able to find not only any answers, but anything resembling an answer. He was in the position of a man looking for food in a toy maker's or a gunsmith's shop. Involuntarily, unconsciously, he now sought in every book, in every conversation, in every person, a connection with these questions and their resolution. What amazed and upset him most of all was that the majority of people of his age and circle, who had replaced their former beliefs as he had, with the same new beliefs as he had, did not see anything wrong with it, and were perfectly calm and content. So that, besides the main question, Levine was tormented by other questions. Are these people sincere? Are they not pretending? Or do they not understand somehow differently, more clearly than he, the answers science gives to the questions that concerned him? And he diligently studied both the opinions of these people and the books that expressed these answers. One thing he had discovered since he began to concern himself with these questions was that he had been mistaken in supposing, from memories of his youthful university circle, that religion had outlived its day and no longer existed. All the good people close to him were believers. The old prince and Lvov, whom he had come to love so much, and Sergei Ivanovitch, and All the women were believers, and his wife believed as he had believed in early childhood, and 99 hundredths of all the Russian people, that people whose life inspired the greatest respect in him, were believers. Another thing was that, after reading many books, he became convinced that those who shared the same views with him saw nothing else implied in them, and without explaining anything simply dismissed the questions which he felt he could not live without answering, and tried to resolve completely different questions which could not be of interest to him. For instance, about the development of the organism, about the mechanical explanation of the soul, and so on. Besides that, while his wife was giving birth, an extraordinary thing had happened to him. He, the unbeliever, had begun to pray, and in the moment of praying he had believed. But that moment had passed, and he was unable to give any place in his life to the state of mind he had been in then. He could not admit that he had known the truth then, and was now mistaken, because as soon as he began to think calmly about it, the whole thing fell to pieces. Nor could he admit that he had been mistaken then, because he cherished his state of soul at that time, and by admitting that it had been due to weakness, he would have profaned those moments. He was in painful discord with himself, and strained all the forces of his soul to get out of it. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.